It's actually insane how much you can fit into the Ncase M2. We're going to load this thing up with an ROG Astral 5080, a 9950X3D CPU that'll be cooled with a 280mm all-in-one liquid cooler. The goal was to have the GPU mounted horizontally in this case, with the cooler radiator mounted vertically on the side, which Ncase calls a level 5 configuration. However, that didn't work out for me because the Astral is just millimeters too thick and you can see it catching here, which didn't allow me to properly seat the card into the PCI slot on the motherboard. So I had to go with what Ncase calls a level 9 build, where I mount the GPU vertically and I mount the radiator up on top horizontally. This led me to another problem. The tubes on the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3, which was my desired cooler for this build, would get in the way of the GPU. So I went with the Corsair Titan 280 instead because the tubes on that allowed the GPU to easily fit. However, this cooler choice brought on its own challenges. This link module, all these cables, having to fit in such a small case, it's going to be super tight and challenging, and I'm really looking forward to it. Let's go. Because the Grater version of this case doesn't come with front input-output, I'm losing out on a front USB-C port. So for the motherboard, I went with the B850i from Asus because it has two USB-C ports on the back, compared to other B850i boards which all seem to just have one on the back. More and more my stuff requires a USB-C interface, so I want as many USB-C ports as I can get. The CPU I'm putting in this is none other than the Ryzen 9950X3D. This is going to be my main video editing, Twitch streaming, and gaming PC, so I don't want to have any compromises when it comes to the CPU. The SSD I'm choosing is a 2TB Crucial T500 Gen 4 SSD. Now, because I thought I was going to be using the Liquid Freezer 3 cooler, I swapped out the Asus SSD heatsink with this aftermarket one because the Asus heatsink isn't compatible when using the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3. The stock heatsink is a bit too tall and it interferes with the Liquid Freezer 3 cooling block when trying to mount it. So I bought this aftermarket one for like $8 or something off Amazon. You can see now that with this cooler, the Liquid Freezer 3 cold plate can easily be mounted. But of course, once I realized the Liquid Freezer 3 was a no-go, I put the stock Asus heatsink back on the SSD. Along with that main Crucial drive, I'm also sticking in a 2TB Western Digital Black 7100 into the back of the board for extra storage for all my content creation needs. For that, I just had to install the little standoff that came with the motherboard to be able to put this SSD in the back of the board. And for the RAM, nothing special, a 64GB kit of DDR5 6000 with a cast latency of 30. I've used this flare line from G.Skill numerous times and it's always been bulletproof. It just works. It always has for me. And that's the motherboard all prepped. Let's start putting this case together and really start having fun. One of the reasons why the Ncase M2 is one of the best cases out there is how modular it is with all the different layouts depending on your components and how you want to lay them out. The case comes shipped disassembled, and putting it all together is, in my opinion, what makes this case so special. You can build the case first, then put all your parts in it, but because my GPU is so long, I have to build the case around the components as I build the PC. The kit comes with everything you need except the vertical GPU bracket, which I bought extra from Ncase. If you're going to be using a vertical GPU, you don't need to buy the Ncase vertical GPU kit, you can make one your own. Chris Russell has a really good tutorial on what he does for mounting his GPU vertically in this case. You should check his channel out. So you'll see here that I installed the motherboard at the top of the frame because I thought I'd be doing that horizontal GPU build. I moved it to the bottom after I realized that my horizontal GPU dreams were crushed. Moving it down also frees up the necessary space to mount the 280mm radiator up top. For the PSU, I went with a Corsair 850W SFX PSU. Going regular SFX over an SFX-L PSU means more room at the bottom of the case for cable management, which did come in handy in the end. The PSU gets mounted to the PSU bracket, which then gets mounted to the frame. I then plugged in all the cables, the 24 and 8-pin power cables, the 16-pin PCI cable, and an extra 6-pin PCI cable for the Corsair Link module, which I'll install in a bit here. Also, I just want to show you how the back panel goes on. It just fits together like Lego. I do end up removing it again later on because I didn't really plan out the sequence of the build very well. Sometimes it's kind of just trial and error. I was just kind of winging everything as I was going on. The back panel comes ready for a horizontal GPU, so I will need to switch that. I'll need to switch the bracket around for a vertical GPU configuration. That's all you have to do to get that vertical GPU orientation ready. Next up, let's get this riser cable prepped and mounted to the bottom panel of the case. I bought this kit straight from Ncase, as I already mentioned. It's really durable and flexible and really easy to use, and it really made installing this GPU quite pleasant. As previously mentioned, you do not need this Ncase riser cable kit. You can have a DUI riser and do it all yourself, just with parts off Amazon or from wherever. Next up is the cable management. This is what I thought was going to be the most challenging part of this build, but it was surprisingly easy. These Corsair cables are amazing and really easy to work with. All the cable lengths seem to be pretty much perfect, with a bit of slack on certain cables, which I don't mind because you never know how you're going to run your cables and you might have to change things up after you think you have a good cable run. I just stored all the extra cable slack in between the motherboard and PSU and pre-ran the GPU cable, making it easy to connect when the time came. This cable here is a PCI power cable, which is not needed for anything in the system, except the Corsair Link module requires it. So I'll just leave it plugged in and leave it on the side for now. This is the power button. It goes on the back of the case as there's no front input-output. Let's just plug this dinky little cord into the motherboard. Then of course, the power cable. I want my power plug to be in the middle of the back of this case and not on the side, so that's why I'm just moving this Ncase logo thing to the other side. So after realizing the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 was not going to work in this build, I needed a cooler with a low profile pump block because of how thick my GPU is, and that is why I specifically chose the Corsair Titan 280mm. Now, this Corsair Titan is not low profile by any means if you keep the pump cap on, but once that's removed, it's a great low profile fit. And I was definitely concerned about all the cabling for this liquid cooler. A lot of coolers just have the 4-pin connector and a 3-pin pump connector. This one has quite a bit extra going on. So I'm going to start by mounting the pump block to the CPU. I just have to change out the Intel hardware for AM5 hardware. Once that's on, the cooler can be mated to the CPU. The cooler tubes come off to the side of the cooling block, unlike the Arctic, which came off the bottom. This gives that extra clearance to be able to have this Astral GPU, because the cables are not getting in the way of the placement of the GPU. For the Link module for the cooler, I decided to mount it on the side of the motherboard frame at the bottom. I didn't expect it to work out so perfectly, but it did. The first cable I plugged in was to link the pump with the module, and then I kind of just tucked that cable away. The second cable was the USB cable, which allows the system to be able to communicate with the Link module using the iQ software in Windows. The third cable here is the PCI Express power adapter, which provides all the power to the module and the pump in the fans. This little cable here is what I call a phantom cable. I'm not sure what Corsair calls it. It isn't sending any data or anything. It's just sending a small signal to the motherboard, telling the motherboard that the CPU fan header is occupied and in use. Otherwise, the motherboard could give me fan errors on boot up or while my PC is running. Once I got all these cables ran, I zip tied everything in place. And damn, am I proud of myself. All the cables are holding the link module in place perfectly. No need to mount the module at all. The cables are holding it down. It isn't going anywhere. Next order of business is to install the front panel so that I can then install the radiator. I loosely mounted it to the bracket so that I can adjust the radiator positioning on the bracket if I need to. Then, time to mount the bracket to the front and rear panels of the case. Alright, and I made a classic blunder. This is where I forgot a crucial cable. The cable that connects the radiator fans to the link module. I completely forgot to plug that in. I thought for sure I was gonna have to undo all my good work. But before freaking out, I planned out what I was gonna do, and it wasn't a catastrophe. I just moved the module over a bit so I had clearance to plug the fan cable in and just ran it up to the fans. Corsair lets you choose on which side you want to plug this cable into the fans, either the front or the back of the case. I chose the back of the case. I really appreciate this all-in-one cooler for this build. Because everything is so tight in here, Corsair made it extremely easy to install their Titan all-in-one. Super glad I went with this cooler. Alright, time for the GPU and the centerpiece of this build. Because this card is so big, I have to do quite a bit of backtracking and disassembling of the case a bit so that the card will fit, because I don't plan this out very well, I just go with the flow. I basically had to take off the front and rear panel, move the radiator, take the riser off the bottom panel, and kinda start over a bunch of steps. Let's get the riser cable inserted into the PCI Express slot on the motherboard, screw the GPU into the rear bracket, plug the power cable into the GPU, and then do everything back up. Remember, you don't build a computer in this case. You build this case around your computer. You're gonna screw up a lot and have to do a lot of rebuilding, but honestly, that's part of the process with these small form factor cases. The more complicated you get, the more this kind of stuff happens if you're someone like me and don't know what you're doing. But anyways, that's it for the build. Let's get the side panels on and fire this bad boy up and talk about my temperatures. I was pushing 70 degrees in Cyberpunk while using the Ray Tracing Overdrive preset, 60 degrees in Planet Coaster, and up to 80 degrees when doing heavy 4K video work in Adobe Premiere. All of this while the radiator fans were running at 50% speed. As for the Astral GPU, my temps never got above 67 degrees. The system is pretty quiet at 50% fan speeds, and cooling is adequate for pretty much anything I'm going to be doing with this computer. I added no extra fans in this system.